Welcome, everyone. I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square. And welcome to First Draft, where I speak with journalists and authors about their important work and the stories behind them. Joining me today is one of my favorite people. Jon King is the editor-in-chief at the Michigan Advance. He has been a journalist for several decades in Michigan. He has a voice for radio and should probably be hosting the show, but you're stuck with me. But Jon is here to tell us what is going on in the Michigan primary, which is coming up in 6 days. Early voting has been underway, and we have one of the most tense Senate races in the country, along with lots of other races on the ballot. So, Jon, thanks for being here to break all of this down for us.
Yeah, of course. Always a pleasure, Susan.
Great. Well, I know that your team at the Michigan Advance has been covering events across the state. There have been some big events. Bernie Sanders was in town for Abdul al-Sayed, who is running for Michigan Senate against Congresswoman Haley Stevens. The last debate was this week between Stevens and al-Sayed. One thing that we have not gotten a lot of is independent polling data, which is usually helpful in these sort of races. So the last independent poll we got showed Stevens up 7, but really the vibe out there is that al-Sayed is ahead. He has been for a while. This is really his race to lose. You're covering this on the ground. What is your take on what's going on?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with the word vibe, because it's really all it is. I think it is a vibe. How that translates into results on Tuesday, we will find out. Yeah, that certainly is the vibe. Is that the energy, the enthusiasm that's on his side. That he'll, he's going to take this. There's no way Haley Stevens could win. I mean, and that take particularly you see mostly in the very progressive echo chambers, and that's what they are. I think al-Sayed has a poll out today, the Tavern Research internal poll that has him up by 10.
Okay.
But that's an internal poll. And again, as you were saying, like independent polling is something that we could use more of, and I'm hoping to see something, certainly by the end of the week. That would be more definitive. So yeah, it's the vibe that al-Sayed is going to surge here. I think that a more sober analysis is that it's going to be close. I don't think there's going to be anyone. I don't think either of these candidates is going to run away with this race. Yeah. And it's going to be about turnout. Those are just some of the old, factors that no one really wants to necessarily deal with. Everyone kind of wants to just groove into their vibe. So, yeah, I am, being, like you said, journalist for several decades, and that was kindly put. Thank you.
It was meant as a compliment.
Yes.
I also have been a journalist for several decades. So,
I'm a glass half empty person. And
how can you not be in Trump's America?
This is true. But to be fair, I was that way even before Trump. So the glass is even less full than it ever was. I tend to think that the things that people don't really want to factor in are going to hold firm. Having more money still makes a difference.
And Haley Stevens definitely is winning on that front. Lots of outside groups are playing in this race, mostly on her side. So that definitely is a structural advantage that she has. At the same time, at some point you're just lighting money on fire if people don't like you and your message, right?
Yeah, I think the money advantage works in two spots. I think it works earlier on. And then I think it will have, it could have an impact very late in the game, last few days. And that's in terms of turnout to the polls. As you pointed out, early voting is already underway. Absentee ballots have been out for almost a month, more than a month, actually.
Right.
So I think late in the game is where you can somewhat utilize that and have an advantage.
Because there still are independent, there are undecided voters out there. There are people who really do wait till the last minute, and sometimes that extra money can, make a difference there. But you mentioned that ballots have been out for more than a month, and that means that they've been out when this was a three-way race, because there was State Senator Mallory McMorrow. She had, the endorsement of Elizabeth Warren. She was kind of trying to split the difference between the establishment and the progressive sides of the party. And she did not drop out until after ballots were out. Do we have any sense of where her voters may be going?
Yeah, I mean that's where both El Sayed and Stevens obviously made a real strong pitch after she dropped to pick up her voters. The Tavern Research poll that's out today, again, that's the internal poll from the El Sayed camp. So keep that in mind. They had McMorrow at 4% of individuals still listing her as their choice. How that pretends, where that's going to actually end up. I think that there was an assurance. I think both sides. I limited this. I think both sides have sort of fallen back on some points that make them feel good, but I don't know how are necessarily true. So I think El Sayed, his supporters, I think they see, well, McMorrow was also a fellow, progressive, not progressive enough in their opinion, but still in that camp. She forswore, corporate PAC donations, but not soon enough and not, enough for them, but still in that camp versus Haley Stevens. And so I think that there was a sense of like, oh, we're going to pick up most of those voters that they're going to come. They're going to come to us. I don't necessarily think that that's the case. I think that there'll be a sizable chunk of them that will, but I don't know that's the case. And I think that there is polling out there that this was earlier in July, but there was polling that showed there was roughly breaking even. That was right after she had left. That when they were talking to McMorrow supporters, they were roughly kind of going in each camp for their various reasons. And so, yeah. And then I think for the Stevens camp, getting the endorsement of Governor Whitmer late last week was something that they thought like, oh, game over. We've, this is it. We've nailed it. I think that's also not necessarily true.
So it's interesting. There have been a lot of people, I think the people who pay the most attention to politics around the Capitol, who have grown disenchanted with Governor Whitmer during the last couple of years of her term. Some of the bills that she vetoed after a long fight, where she kind of undid a battle that Democrats in the legislature had been fighting for a while. Certainly the fact that she has tried to be much less combative with President Trump this term than she was during his first term. But it really is not reflected in the polling, at least up until now. I mean, she is far and away the most popular governor in her last year than we've had in decades. And if you looked at Jennifer Granholm's numbers, Rick Snyder's numbers in their last years, and I covered both of them, people were ready for them to go. Gretchen Whitmer is still popular. She might take a hit because, especially if Abdul El-Sayed wins. And certainly some of those progressives that I don't think were as tuned in on policy are now very upset that she has not endorsed their candidate. But I'm not sure that that's really going to make such a dent, and she'll leave in the 30s. And so, if you're going to get an endorsement in this state, I think this was a helpful one for Haley Stevens. I think, having the support of Gary Peters, the retiring senator, Debbie Sabinow, who was the senior senator for years, all those things are helpful. It's just a matter of how much. And I guess that's what we're grappling with, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think they reinforce what they already represent. I mean, Haley Stevens represents the establishment wing, the centrist wing of the party. Her endorsements, as Governor Whitmer included, represent that. And so for folks who early on, said, that this was the person that they thought could best win in November. And I think that's a key thing trying to keep in mind, like, yes, the election is not Tuesday, not the one that really matters. That's in November.
Right.
So I think that each of those, and El Sayed has racked up all of the progressive, endorsements, and just today, he got a couple of additional ones. I think Ed Markey and Ed Markey and Ayanna Pressley endorsed him today. So he's gathering all those. That reinforces that. I don't think that change. There's no change agent in these endorsements. It just sort of reinforces what you represent, and so again, it comes down to turnout.
Right.
Old-fashioned feet on the ground turnout operations. What's your ground game? How are you going to get people to the polls, and so on, and what's your plan for the final few days to really take it to the tape? And we'll see how that bears out.
Yeah. I know a lot of this race is concentrated on the differences that El Sayed and Stevens have on Israel and Gaza in particular, and corporate money. By and large, we tend to magnify the differences in the primary, and it becomes this blood sport between, the progressives and what we consider people who are moderate or to establishment. And especially, I think, with everybody being on edge during the second Trump administration and Democrats being completely out of power in Washington, this is the time to have those fights within the Democratic Party. But it tends to ignore some of the history, I think. And in 2018, both Haley Stevens and Gretchen Whitmer were part of this wave of progressive women, or at least what was considered progressive at the time, who came into office due to an extreme backlash against Donald Trump in his first term. And it was it was a blue wave, but it was really a pink wave. And back then, nobody was calling Haley Stevens establishment. She won a Republican congressional seat that a lot of people didn't think she could win. And there were all those shorts about, Jocelyn and Dana and Gretchen and Rashida. And that was really the ethos of the new wave of the Democratic Party. Now it's become, much more of a Bernie Sanders, centric progressive vision. And the DSA has had a lot of success in New York in particular. And so those changes are there. But I think probably a factor that people haven't considered in Gretchen Whitmer's endorsement is, at the end of the day, she's always propped up other women, and that's the wave that she came in on, and Haley Stevens was part of that. And to some degree, what we've seen is that there's been a hunger for the on the progressive side to have, a lot of male candidates out there to try and win back those young male Trump voters. And that's been more of a focus this year. And Abdul El Sayed fits that. But, there are many people in the party that, came from that 2018 wave year. And that seems to be memory hold a bit.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's interesting you hit upon, the trio of Whitmer, Benson, and Nessel, and there's and how in 2018 and through 2022, very united, very focused. There's the classic photo out there from the 2022 election night of them doing the Charlie's Angels pose together.
Right.
I almost feel like that might have been the last time they were together on anything, because I think it began to break down kind of after that. And and so, but tacking back to what you talked about, the Israel Gaza issue and how that's played out. I mean, I think in terms of where you've seen the Democratic coalition break down in a way, or divide itself, or sort of self-select, is on that issue. But it's sort of the marquee issue. It's the iceberg, like it's the tip. And then underneath the water, it's been connected to, let's put it that way, corporate PAC donations, corporate influence in the party, and then as well, then it's even more then that's been connected to data center development and AI and the surveillance state. And so I think the progressives in the Democratic Party have done a good job of uniting that and saying, like, Gaza and Israel, yeah, these are moral issues, and we have very strong opinions on those. But for those who go, what's happening in Israel and Gaza, is that really any worse? It's what's going on in this country or Ukraine or whatever. It's horrible either way you look at it. If that doesn't spark anything in them, they go, well, what about these corporate? What about your utility rates? How does that strike you? Well, we've connected those for you. Data centers, a very horseshoe issue. People on the far right, the far left hate data centers, what they represent, even if they don't even know exactly what they are. It's just what they represent. So you see this sort of fracturing within the party. And I think Governor Whitmer, as you said, still retains, the latest polling still retains, great popularity amongst Democratic voters in general. And as she leaves office, you're right, she will leave office. It's certainly, better than Rick Snyder did. Of course, she hasn't poisoned the city's water, so that helps. And then Governor Granholm before, she left on a recession note. And so that
her entire term was in a recession.
This is true. So in that sense, you could, sort of look at it that way. But that point, though, is, what we're going to find out on Tuesday is how deep is that division.
Right.
What we're going to find out after Tuesday is, can that division be bridged towards November? Because whoever wins Tuesday, and we'll go back to the Senate race, if El Sayed wins on Tuesday, I've seen a lot of people, and this is anecdotal, but I've seen a lot of comments and other people saying, like, I don't really know if I really like El Sayed or not. He's not really, I don't know, but I feel like I have to vote for him, or I should vote for him, because if I don't, his voters, there's no way they're going to vote for Haley. They hate her so much. And that, we could have a whole other discussion about the some of the misogyny that has surfaced, I think, here.
Certainly online, and that seemed to be a factor for Gretchen Whitmer in endorsing, the misogyny that's been aimed at Haley Stevens online by a lot of El Sayed supporters, and certainly a lot of bots play online. We all know that, but it did get so bad that El Sayed did, do a post a couple weeks ago telling people to calm down, attack Haley's ideas, don't attack her for being ugly. And when you have to say that, it's a pretty good acknowledgement that there's some sort of an issue there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. that was a real, moment where you're like, it's exactly, it's so bad, you need to come out and just address it publicly. Hey, cut it out. And then there's, obviously, that particular dynamic has some roots that go back. El Sayed, of course, ran for governor in 2018 against Gretchen Whitmer. That was a bit of a bitter battle. It was a preview, I think, in a sense, of the progressive versus the more establishment wing. Even though at the time, you're right, I think, Gretchen Whitmer represented, a progressive stance coming in. In a way, I think El Sayed's position, the progressive position, the DSA position, has become more where it was like almost an extreme far left. It's really moved itself as close as it can to the center, or probably more accurately, it's changed the direction of the lens more towards itself. And so it seems to be more centrist than maybe what it really is. After next Tuesday, though, whoever the nominee is, the real question, because you got Mike Rogers, the Republican candidate, is just eating popcorn and sitting in the wings waiting. And, he's got a ton of money. He's had no bruising fight. He's got plenty of oppo courtesy of the Democrats on whoever wins. He's got whether it's Haley Stevens or El Sayed, he's all set and he's ready to go. And so the real question for these voters is, do you want to win the ideological battle, or do you want to put a Democrat back into the U.S. Senate in that seat that has not been represented by a Republican since 2001?
Right, Spencer Abraham.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they
Yeah.
haven't elected a Democrat since 1994. I'm sorry, a Republican. Yeah, sorry.
Yep. Yeah, and so I mean, part of this is kind of like a continuing battle from the 2024 election over Gaza. And you had the uncommitted movement, and you had a lot of voters, progressive voters, Arab American voters in Michigan that sat on their hands, wouldn't vote for Kamala Harris. Some of them voted for Trump. And, Donald Trump did win Michigan, and this was a decisive issue, and it's been a roiling issue in the party. And, you are seeing, anecdotally, there are plenty of El Sayed voters that are saying, I won't vote for Stevens in the general. Look what we did in 2024. We can do it again. And so, they're staking their claim there. But we do have some polling that's dropped, which I did think was interesting, that shows that Mike Rogers, and he there was a story I think CNN had, that he is very eager to run against El Sayed. He thinks his odds are pretty decent, and he may be misreading the moment, but I thought that was interesting. And along with that polling that shows that Stevens is far stronger in the general than he is. I'm not sure how much of a difference it will be, because it does seem to be such a strong Democratic year. But what I do know is that Republicans will spend big in this race, because they will see that there's a shot against the progressive candidates. There is a lot of oppo, and you're seeing a drop in right-wing media right now. The Washington Free Beacon has had some banger stories against El Sayed. Interestingly, coming out before the primary. I would have expected those afterwards. But, if that's what they're dropping now, I'm very curious what might drop before November. And Mike Rogers seems to think that he's got a pretty good case to make. I don't know that it's enough this year. It may just be any Democrat can win. But I think there are two things for Democrats. How much money will have to be in Michigan to save the seat that could have gone to Texas or North Carolina or Maine or Iowa, or Alaska? And then the other question is, what is John Fetterman going to do? Is there any way to get to 51 seats? Because he has said, if the party becomes anti-Israel, I'm out. To me, El Sayed in the Senate means he's going to go caucus with Republicans. So it's like heads we win, heads they win, tails we lose. I mean, is there really any way to get to a Democratic majority? Are we just screwed here? And that's something that keeps me up at night.
Yeah, I think you bring up the exact point of this. Fetterman is their ace up the sleeve. They being the Republicans.
Yeah.
They have a ton of money. Obviously, they have more money. The Democrats are. They've hawked their headquarters. They're not paying vendors. That's a mess at the DNC. And so when you talk about like all the money that they have to pour into a seat that was solidly Dem, should be solidly Dem, to keep it in the Democratic column, they're going to spend money that they really should be spending in Maine to flip a seat, or in Texas to flip a seat. And they're going to have to spend it here to keep a seat. That's a real problem. And then the Fetterman factor complicates it even further. I mean, there was the comment that El Sayed made that was brought to light. That he on a fundraising call, he talked about putting an ogre's head on a pike, and a lot of folks said, "Oh, that was another." He was referring to Haley, and that this was some sort of his explanation for that during the last debate was he was talking about Fetterman. I tend to think he was talking about Fetterman actually. And I think it does set up exactly the dynamic that you're laying out, which is even if El Sayed wins, and then he goes on to win in the general, that I think him in particular, but is part of a larger trend, because if El Sayed wins, in November, it's going to be because the progressives have really made a move and will have an impact. But in
Mhm.
the person of El Sayed, you're right. You could see Fetterman, and I think you probably will see Fetterman start to flip. And so, I mean, they've already. I mean, El Sayed was already talking about in particular about Fetterman. I mean, in a way, you go, whoa, you're already making your plans for when you're a U.S. senator, like win the primary first, buddy. Because he was saying, like, if we can win this, and then I can get to the Senate, then we can primary Fetterman, and we're gonna take him out in 28. And you're like, hey, just win your primary. And so they're already.
We already have
Yeah,
like a website for a presidential run that he has
yeah,
reserved. I mean,
yeah.
he definitely is still he's looking far ahead.
If he loses on Tuesday, he's not done.
No,
You'll
nobody thought he was done in 2018 either.
no, and
No, he has
no,
he's got a long career ahead of him.
right. If in podcasting, if nothing else, and that was a reference to the last debate. Podcasting became a big issue in that last debate, which was whatever. So to your point, yes, Democrats are screwed. No, I'm.
We're here to bring you hope, folks. Everything's great.
Yeah, it's a real problem. I mean, I think they'll have to deal with that as it comes. But it really goes back to, in a way, progressives would say this makes our case exactly. We have to get these quote unquote fake Democrats out of the party, the Kristen Sinemas and the John Fettermans.
But John Fetterman was a progressive.
That's
agree. How he won. And so my counterpoint would be, let's not elect assholes. Maybe character counts a little more. Maybe it's not good enough just to say the right things, but to determine if someone seems to be completely full of shit.
I think that has bumper sticker appeal. Let's not elect assholes. But the Graham Plattner example is the perfect example of that, that issue. That right, it does cut across broader thrust. Although Fetterman, I mean, yes, he ran as a progressive, but so did Sinema.
I know.
And then they weren't. I mean, right. I think you can demonstrably say both of them then became non-progressives. I think that's a fair statement.
Right. And there are lots of incentives in the Senate with to be the one senator that holds everything up.
Right.
All those pictures of the press corps swarming around Joe Manchin for years. I mean, you have to have a certain ego to run for U.S. Senate. Certainly that's appealing. But at the same time, we as voters might want to do a better job vetting people so that we don't give them that sort of power. I'm not saying that, it's a perfect system. It certainly isn't. But I think the one biggest takeaway we can all agree on is, voting for the guy who is an amusing reality show host in 2016 has been an absolute disaster for this country, and we're still dealing with it. So voting for somebody who seems amusing but kind of a dick maybe isn't the best idea.
No. I mean, it's the hero worship. I mean, if your personal heroes are politicians,
no, never do that.
Yeah, you might want to rethink that.
No,
look at that again. But I think it is the hero worship, and so again, use the Plattner example of, well, he's saying all the things I like that so then the Nazi tattoo, and you go, well, okay, but he's saying the things I like, so I'm going to let that go. And then, well, he was sort of rough with women in his life. But he says the things I like, so I'm going to let that go until it blows up in your face.
Right.
And so the original hunches on someone like that, should have played out, and they didn't. So yeah, I don't know. There's no easy answer for that.
Right. Well, and I want to talk about some of the other races in Michigan, because of course this is the marquee race and this is where all the heat is online, but there are many important races going on in Michigan, not just next week with the primary, but certainly in the general. But before we move on from Mike Rogers, because he is somebody that you and I have both covered for years, he allegedly lives like 10 minutes from you. Back when we worked together, I remember one of your stories was watching his little cabin being rebuilt, and we had all the photos in real time back when he was running against Alyssa Slotkin for another Senate seat in 2024. Now that house has been built, maybe he lives here more than Florida now. I'm sure that will be an issue in the general. But long before any of that, he was a really well-respected member of Congress. He was conservative, but, considered to be reasonable. His flip to becoming a Trump guy seemed rather calculated. But he is one of those people. Like, I traveled with him when we were visiting troops training from Michigan at Fort Dix during the Iraq War. I believe he gave you an award for journalism at one point. That's how much that's how long you go back with him. But he is one of those guys who's just kind of like a ready-made politician. Like, you can't help but like him when you talk to him, even if you disagree with everything he says. He's running ads about how he's the son of a teacher and he's going to bring back SHOP and he'll stop AI from taking your jobs. And he just seems like, I'm just regular old Mike. He doesn't tell you he's a Republican. In a better year, I think, he would be an extremely strong candidate. It just may be the exact wrong year for any Republican. But I mean, Jon, you've watched this guy for years. I mean, if Republicans had to put someone up this year, he's a pretty good candidate for them, right? I mean, it won't be a walk for any Democrat.
No, he is right for all the reasons you just laid out. Yes, he is the candidate. I think also in the sense of for Republicans, he's also willing to completely set aside his morals and his ideological bearings and put those to the side and not let those get in the way. Yeah. And so that's perfect. And so, I mean, this was somebody who was openly critical of Trump in his first term about his foreign policy. And was, very clear that, Russia, interfered and so on and so forth. I mean, we'll get into all.
He's a former FBI agent. He has a national security profile. So,
And he chaired the House Intelligence Committee for many, many years. Very powerful position. And once he left Congress and decided to become a lobbyist,
a radio talk show host for a brief period.
Right. He had a CNN show at one point. And so, yeah, it seemed like, okay, he took that, I'm done. I'm going to go cash in and I'm out of here. He then, I think the opening came with when Debbie Stabenow, I mean, let's kind of go back. When Debbie Stabenow, the former senator from Michigan, announced that she was going to retire, that was a huge surprise to everybody. And suddenly there was this opening and he thought, oh, whoa, I have a chance to get back into the Senate. And, he ran against Slotkin and lost. Right. And I think Democrats got to go. Yeah, right. I mean, but Alyssa Slotkin did what she always does, which is pull out wins by just 2 or 3 points. Right. She did. That's her game.
And she held the congressional seat, that Mike Rogers had retired from. So, she won in an area where that seat was explicitly designed for him, and she managed to flip it.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm saying about Democrats would be good to take some lessons from Alyssa Slotkin, who, to a lot of the progressives who love Abdul Sayed, they don't like Alyssa Slotkin. Well, okay. Anyway, Mike Rogers, yes, is they found the perfect candidate, the best candidate, we'll say, to hold down that seat, and it will be a fight. It's not going to be a runaway either way. But I would also point out, in Trump's world, in Trump's America, between now and November is a long time. Anything can happen. We'll see what happens. But yeah, they're sitting well. And Mike Rogers is pretty well positioned, to take that. And as you put, very affable, very. He's just, you see a lot of the MAGA politicians, of which he is now one. He's a MAGA. You can't be endorsed by Donald Trump and not be MAGA. He's MAGA. A lot of these MAGAs, they love to stick it, to the press and they love to stick it to the lefties. And, not Rogers is, he's MAGA. He says all the things he needs to say in that realm. But he's an affable guy. He's a very, he has that sense. He has that charisma. And so he can work a room.
Right.
We'll see how that is going to bear out when gas prices are, hitting $5.
Yeah.
And we're still in a war with Iran. We'll see how that bears out.
Right. Well, Donald Trump was in town to campaign for John James, who is a congressman, a Republican congressman running for governor. Several other, Republicans were there on stage. This was in Milford, which is outside of Detroit, closer to mid-Michigan, where we're from. I think we have some footage from the Donald Trump show.
We're having the single greatest year we've ever had as a country. We're not going to let these people destroy it.
Single greatest year. He also was saying that we should thank him because he's done more for us than our parents have.
The people that count. Those people love Trump. Because I've done more for you than your parents, okay? Your parents are good. I'm not going to knock your parents, but I have been better to you than your parents.
Okay, so John, you and I have covered Donald Trump for much longer than we ever expected to or wanted to. We've watched his speeches. He's been coming to Michigan for over a decade. I was not in the room, and I know one of your reporters was, but just watching it, he seems tired. A lot less energy, but how did Michigan respond to him being there? How did the crowd respond?
Oh, they loved it. As they do. I think it's always a spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
I always think of Russell Crowe and Gladiator. Are you not entertained?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think people come to, they're not coming to hear sober policy analysis.
Right.
They're coming to hear him say things like, you owe me more than your parents. And then they all cheer, it's nonsensical in that sense. And so I think the people that are, want to come out to a Trump rally, that's what they want, and that's what he gives them. Yeah, but to your other point, yeah, he does. He does seem tired. He does seem less enthusiastic. He somewhat doesn't really give a shit anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You can say somewhat. Constantly undermining his own party's message about affordability. Oh, that's a scam.
Right.
Gas prices are high. Well, that's a good thing. Okay. You wrote a column, I think, a day or two ago, talking about how he seems to be a man running out of time. He's putting his name on everything because he just wants to, I think he feels it himself.
Yeah, he's 80 years old, and look, he looks it in that speech.
Right. And there's been a photo comparison of him, not in Michigan, but I think at another rally where they put up the Getty Images photo that they took of him, and it showed him as he really looked. And then there was the photo that was released by the White House, completely airbrushed and AI, and he looks wonderful and youthful. And that's the world that they inhabit, and that's the people want to believe that, and they do.
Right.
Yeah. It was interesting at that rally, all supporters, a data center protest broke out,
Yeah.
which I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, and we didn't get a chance to talk to any of those because they were the people that they were escorted out, obviously.
Right.
Trump denounced them as they were speaking, and people were booing, I think, just because they're ruining the show. It would be, in a sense, it's like standing up at a movie and having your, hey, man, I'm trying to watch the movie. Right. I think that's where people were at. They don't care. Even the people that were there were yeah, I hate data centers too, but I'm here to watch the movie. So do you mind? But what, that particular event, the thing that I was most caught my eye that I was Mary Barra of GM. Because it was the GM Milford Proving Grounds. It was a
Right.
General Motors facility, and here she is, basically at a Trump political rally, rah-rahing on. They gave Trump some drag racing demonstrations of some of their vehicles beforehand because they're at this test track, and
he's getting 250 Escalades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just you look at this. This is the guy that is running a tariff regime that is going to crush and is crushing American manufacturing,
right?
And doesn't care. So back to the point of he doesn't care.
Yeah.
And yet here is even so it's not just MAGA supporters who just love him and they always have and they wear the red hat and all the rest. It's even people like that. The CEO of GM they're out there rah-rah-rahing too, and you go, really, why?
Yeah.
I know why, but it's very marked in that sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the supposed reason for his visit was to boost John James, who is running for governor. It seems like it's his race to lose. Mike Cox, a former attorney general, dropped out. He is still on the ballot. Perry Johnson is a businessman who has run for everything for years, puts out wild commercials, never seems to get any support of note. And then the Senate Minority Leader, Eric Nesbitt, is still on the ballot, but he has dropped out. So it's kind of anticlimactic, but Donald Trump still felt the need to come in. Maybe not useful to Republicans in a year like this, but it seems like he can't help himself.
No. Yeah, again, we're not breaking any news here to say that Donald Trump is for Donald Trump. And everything else, only how it relates back to him. So him coming to support John James, does this really, are you moving the needle? Why would you do that? He's got the nomination pretty much now. Perry Johnson he's somebody who likes to set his own money on fire. And that's fine. He's providing a lot of
legal consultants are thrilled. John Yob has made so much money off the man, so why not?
Yeah, of course. And they're happy to take more. If he was coming to that, he was in Michigan's 7th district. If he was coming to support anybody, it should have been Congressman Tom Barrett.
Right. Who is, one of the most endangered members of Congress. That is the seat that Alyssa Slotkin used to represent. She did beat Tom Barrett, but when she vacated the seat, he did win during the year that Trump won Michigan in 2024. But yeah, that is a good point there. And I'm not sure that that's terribly helpful to Tom Barrett.
No, he was there and he was allowed to speak. John James, though, he gave James a chance to talk before and then during he gave him 2 spots. And I think that goes back to this whole notion of he's reiterating hey, I endorsed this guy, and so he's gonna win. It doesn't matter. Why are you expending your capital for something it's a foregone conclusion he's going to be the nominee? Come back later if you want to. Okay, fine. I don't understand that. But if you're going to expend some capital now, it would make sense. Political professionals would look at that and say, maybe Tom Barrett's the guy that you should have been highlighting. And Mike Rogers was there as well. And he had his say, and that's fine. So yeah, where the president's priorities are, as always, they are all paths lead back to Donald Trump and his ego.
Right.
So yeah, that visit to me was about serving his ego. He's reiterating, because there is a grassroots movement within some Republicans. It's not enough to change the game, but it's loud. The progressive movement within the Democrats. There is a loud grassroots movement within Republicans in Michigan that John James is not a real Republican. He's not conservative enough.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room. He's African American.
Certainly.
This is at a high point for racism in the MAGA movement.
Right. Right. 100%. That is an issue that, interestingly enough, John James ran for statewide office twice and lost.
Right. He ran for Senate twice, once against Debbie Stabenow in 2018, once against Gary Peters in 2020. Famously claimed that he won, just like Donald Trump did, but he did not.
And just like Mike Rogers did in 2024. This is the name of the game, obviously. Elections are fixed. Unless we win, then they're excellent. They're wonderful.
Right.
But back to so there's this grassroots movement within the Republicans that they don't like John James. He's not really going to be. There have been some really scurrilous stuff that's going on. We're trying to connect him to other Democrats and just garbage stuff that's out there that really
that garbage has come from Democrats as well.
This is true. You know, that is a great point. And I'm merely going to mention that there is garbage. I don't know that we really want to get into the garbage.
No, I'm not interested in conspiracy theories and rumors, but it does say something about how toxic I think a lot of these elections have gotten online.
Absolutely.
And there is a lot of misogyny and racism out there, and sad to say it's not just on the Republican side.
No. And I mean, if there's one thing, if we want to really go back, if there's one thing that I personally took away from 2016 to take you back, was, which, I guess I was clueless, I guess, as every other, middle-aged white male probably was too, was the level of misogyny in this country. Like, I knew it existed, but I didn't realize how deep and dark it was. And it's not gotten any less in 10 years since. No. It's gotten worse to the point of, like, as you're saying, like it's moved into Democratic circles as well, or it's been more amplified. It's always there, but it's been amplified more. And so, that's a more longer term, issue to try and grapple with. But again, it was Trump. I think just Trump trying to he's got to shore up his, I supported John James. He's the nominee. I've endorsed him. That's the end of it. So stop this.
Right.
Perry Johnson, the guy that was trying to, take on John James, the same day that Trump came to Milford, he held a quote unquote Trump tailgate down the street, more or less. Mm-hmm. And was the Trump campaign headquarters, which I'm like, really? What? Trump has a campaign headquarters? That's interesting because he's in his second term, but they had to literally put out a thing saying you can't call this a Trump tailgate to Perry Johnson, a fellow Republican. You can't call it a Trump tailgate because we've endorsed John James. They went out of their way to make this thing. Yeah. So that's underlying a lot of that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating dynamic because, of course, in order to win on the Republican side, you need to present yourself as being as MAGA as possible. But, Trump is still the final boss.
He is until he isn't.
Right. And I guess JD Vance thinks he will be, but I don't think you're going to see Vance tailgates have that same impact.
No.
Well, we'll see. Before I let you go, John, I do want to talk to you about the dynamics in the governor's race, because it's kind of a yawner on the Democratic side. You have Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, and Chris Swanson is the Genesee County Sheriff, who has just not gotten any traction. But I'm wondering what your take is. Why was there not such a pitched battle, this establishment versus progressive battle for governor? Because you did have Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist. He was running. He had taken up the progressive mantle, and he was campaigning hard on the Gaza issue. And he just was never able to catch fire the same way that Abdul al-Sayed was. And he dropped out of the race, was basically coronated at the Michigan Democratic Party convention as Secretary of State as kind of a consolation prize. And then it was basically everybody coalesced around Jocelyn Benson. I mean, the last poll I saw, I think she was up 88-12.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty much over. So why wasn't that a focus of this internal party tension, the way the U.S. Senate race has become?
That is a great question that I don't necessarily have a direct answer for. But as you pointed out, Garland Gilchrist tried to take up that mantle and got nowhere. I tend to think that I think that Jocelyn Benson, look, she's been laying this course to run for governor for a long time, at least since 2022, and has done an excellent job of building an organization and getting the ducks in a row, so to speak, to be able to do this. And then consequently in the background, I mean, because she's Michigan Secretary of State, because she was, specifically called out by Donald Trump in his first term. There were people that showed up at her home in Detroit with guns. Yeah. And she held the line of, we're going to count the ballots and we're going to, report what they say. And so she's received a lot of well-earned plaudits for holding democracy. So having that position of Secretary of State, I think in the Trump era, has benefited her greatly. I think it brought her a lot of adherents amongst progressives that might not otherwise been. Garland Gilchrist, unfortunately, as lieutenant governor, that's not a great position to garner. I think a lot of people just honestly didn't know who he was.
We have not had a lot of successful lieutenant governors who have gone on to do things afterwards. I mean, John Cherry, his bid for governor fizzled out before it really began. After Jennifer Granholm, we have endless numbers of people on the Republican side who didn't go anywhere, like Dick Posthumus. So it is a tough position, but he has been out there. It is a curiosity of mine because I do remember in covering Whitmer, especially throughout the 2024 election, she was always emphasizing the Whitmer Gilchrist administration and trying to boost him. He was involved in a lot of high profile interviews that she was in, but he just was not able to make that transition and spared at least another really bitter battle for the party. But does that mean that Jocelyn Benson is the odds-on favorite in November against whoever Republican it is, most likely John James?
Of all the races we have talked about today, that's the one I'm most comfortable saying yes.
Okay.
And again, it's a long time between now and November. And the voters will have their say. But having said all that, those qualifications with the asterisk on them that I can point to later if I'm wrong, no, I think she is definitely the odds-on favorite to be the next governor.
What about the odds of Democrats taking back the state house? Because we're one of the very few states that has divided government right now. And there is a Michigan Democratic majority in the Senate, but the House did flip when Donald Trump won the state in 24. So where would you put the odds on that flipping back to Democrats in the fall?
I think it favors Democrats. It's not nearly as much of I don't want to say Benson winning is a slam dunk, but I think she's the odds-on favorite. I think you could say for the Democrats, it's if things hold, if they play their cards correctly and they don't make a major misstep. I think that there's such intense voter dissatisfaction out there that it's hard to be the party in power and make a case necessarily that you should continue in that vein. And I think for the Republicans in the House, I think that the Democrats will have a good chance, we'll say, to take back the House. And I think they'll hold the Senate. I don't think that that's much of a danger. We mentioned the Senate. I think a key indicator was that special Senate election in mid-Michigan for the Saginaw area, for the seat formerly held by Kristen McDonald-Rivet, who's now a congresswoman, but that seat that she held. And then it was a special election. And Chedrick Green won that seat, Saginaw Fire Captain, just way outperformed, and ran away with it, a 30-plus win.
Yeah. that's a positive indication for Democrats, where everyone is really nervous about this U.S. Senate seat, and it's gotten really bitter and divisive. But Democrats have been overperforming in those special elections.
And as you know, that area, especially purple, not a blue.
Trump has been very successful in Saginaw County and that Tri-County area with Flint and Bay City. So that is like, Kristen McDonald-Rivet, was, very blunt. Trump won my district when I won.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a perfect example of that. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. It's fascinating to talk with you about all this. As somebody who's covered Michigan politics for so many years, it is really interesting to see that we might have 12 years of a Democratic governor, which I don't know the last time we had that in history. The last time we had a Republican who managed that feat was before term limits. It was all John Engler. He served 3 terms, but we have a great tradition of flipping back and forth between the parties. We'll give you your 2 terms, but then we want something else. So, in spite of the fact that I know you're covering all this craziness with the U.S. Senate, maybe Democrats will get their shit together, and it might be a good day for them in November after all, huh?
It's possible.
Okay.
Anything is possible.
Anything's possible. That's the hope that we're going to leave you with.
Yeah, that's the glass half full part of me. Anything is possible.
There you go. Well, Jon, I love talking with you as always. We'll have to talk again before the November election, but thanks for getting us up to speed on everything.
Of course. Thank you. Always a pleasure, Susan.
Great. And thanks to all of you for joining us as well.